this was a case that was submitted to our partners who do a similar Project ECHO in the state of Virginia. This is an anonymous case from an institution there that it was a part of their Project ECHO, and they submitted it to us for discussion. And so we will, at this point, just stay in the same group here for discussion. And so if you have any questions after I kind of read through what we have here, then we can get started with that. The questions that they kind of had up front that you can be thinking about while we go through the case are, how do we create a sense of belonging on campus? And how do we make counseling services more inclusive? And then the relevant information on the case is that there is a 19-year-old Native American female from Arizona attending school in Virginia. In this case, she has grown up on a reservation her entire life. She stated her move to college was a culture shock. She's struggling with adjusting to college life, experiencing symptoms of adjustment disorder with depressed mood. She has some passive suicidal ideation. She's expressed difficulty in finding other Native students who she can connect with. And then the writer says that there are maybe a handful of Native American students on their campus, but most of these did not grow up on a reservation. The student has shared experiences in which her peers have been culturally insensitive to her Native roots and identity, and she feels limitations based off of her gender, ethnicity, and cultural heritage. She has been hesitant to speak out and speak up for herself, and wants to stay on campus to help build something better for students coming after her. And so the counseling center was asking how they could support her, both with her current situation as well as trying to build something for other students. So as far as what has been done so far, they said that every student has the opportunity to create a club to foster inclusivity and celebrate their culture. In the counseling center, they try to see where that staff can fit in with increasing inclusivity and appealing to the whole student body. If you scroll down to those that are involved, one thing I noticed right off the bat was there's only one department that's checked here. And so it seems like maybe this was a situation that came in through a counseling scenario. The student came in to seek counseling because of what she was experiencing, and no one else had really been involved or referred at this time. So before we get into discussion, does anybody have any questions just about the situation or the case? Or any first thoughts when you see this? I had a couple additional questions while you all are thinking of your questions. And one thing that I thought of is some recent discussions that I've been hearing just around the general barriers to fostering connection on campus. And I think this particular case was submitted kind of during the height of COVID, with a lot of classes being online. And if you notice at the top, when they say, how do we create a sense of belonging, especially at this time, that's what they were referring to for this case. And so I think there's been new conversations around what everybody can do on the campus to help kind of foster some of that connection. And one thought that I just heard last week, actually, at the WVCIA conference, was faculty encouraging the faculty members to structure their education and their curriculum so that students are forced to make friends with each other. So another way that the speaker put this was, she assigns group work in her classes to help facilitate some of that connection to the students around you, so that students have more of a chance to find out someone that they might have things in common with. And so the group work might encourage them to talk about something that's important to them or something they enjoy doing or things like that, as kind of an icebreaker so that they can help foster some of that connection that has been lacking over the last few years for students. So that's one thought I have just around making, encouraging that sense of belonging on campus. But what other thoughts are there on this case?
I'll go. Hi, everyone. So we actually had a group of Native American students, and this has been years ago. I don't know all of what happened for the inclusivity part, but I know that I attended a couple of events that were hosted by this group, and they were here specifically to play lacrosse. So there was, I think we had maybe like 5 students on the team, and they were coming from the same reservation as well. So that probably helped. It might be a little bit different than this student, but they talked about the origins of lacrosse and how important it was to their community, and just kind of did an educational type of program for the campus community for us to learn more about them. And that, I thought that was really beneficial. And I'm thinking that maybe something to that extent could happen, where maybe like a brown bag lunch, and maybe we don't just single out this one student, but maybe we have like a cultural sharing of different cultures that this student happens to participate in, that might, you know, help the conversation and just help people understand, and also help this student to then feel a little bit of a sense of connection, or find who her people are, find her resources through that type of an event. And then the other thing I was thinking was, if it's a residential campus, and I'm sorry, I might have missed that in the intro, but you know, really getting the resident assistants involved in that process to kind of help connect the student to whatever's going on campus and different clubs and organizations. And they could also do that through DEI office if there's a diversity, equity, inclusion office on campus too. So those are just my sort of first thoughts about that.
Yeah, Michelle, those are great suggestions. And I liked the idea, and it sounded like from what we have here that this student would be interested in something like the lacrosse students on your campus did, an opportunity to share some of what's important to her in order to connect with other people. Another thing about this, you know, we kind of are looking at this from the global perspective somewhat, but also the student did say that she was experiencing some suicidal ideation, she had depression, and perhaps there are more opportunities there than just connecting her with other students, and looking into the training that the counselor has, and the knowledge that the counselor might have around the experience of growing up on a reservation and then moving into a different cultural milieu.
I work at Marshall, and everything is kind of like herd related, or something related to like the bison or the herd. We have a program that's it falls under herd path, but for first year incoming students, they get assigned to a FAM mentor, which is a friend at Marshall, is normally an upper class student who just periodically like checks in with them. They'll send them text messages or get them involved with like campus programs. But also they started through our counseling department here. They have counselors in residence in the residence halls. I know for sure they have it in a few. They might be trying to get them in all of the halls, but so to kind of fight that stigma of like students might not want to go to the campus counseling center, they have them with an office set up in the residence hall so that they can go during like their drop-in time. So it's kind of in the first floor of, you know, where they live, easier access and just less of a like if they're afraid somebody's gonna, see them go. Our campus counseling centers in kind of the middle of campus. And they've done some really good things to like put some like privacy glass up in the lobbies. So not a lot of students would, know if somebody was going in there. But I know still some students would probably feel like maybe they were more comfortable if it wasn't like they had to kind of get out of their room and like travel to the middle of campus for it. So those are two things I can think of. I know it's not directly related to getting involved with like a certain group of students, but I do feel like student affairs and kind of getting students out and involved would definitely help out. And I think it's a good retention program too, because they've seen some good numbers with students being able to stay like on campus and want to be involved because of that connection.
That's great. Lots of good suggestions in there. And I particularly picked up when you mentioned the privacy glass, because that's something that is kind of structural on our campuses and can include getting some budget approved, but it could go a long way for helping, like you said, reduce stigma.
Yeah, they did a lot of good stuff with our counseling center. They forced like one way into the building so that because the building is really set up kind of like as an academic building, and a lot of students would you'd have a lot of like through traffic around the counseling center. So they changed the pattern, and I know all of our counselors there, they have like noise machines and everything going like outside the doors. So there's a lot of stuff that if I was a student walking in, I think I'd feel a little more reassured knowing that it's kind of more like a private kind of clinical setting than just like a kind of like the typical like walk-in services, that you would see somewhere.
This is just a question for the group. So Carolyn, you said, this probably was during, the pandemic in the thick of it, with kids kind of coming back and things are quote unquote getting back to normal, whatever that means on campus. Do we see more of this, like where they feel the isolation, even though things are, you're allegedly coming back to campus and, going to class and doing those things? Like, has any of that changed or carried on, even though things are opening back up?
I know I can say for our program here on campus, the pandemic kind of did, get students a little more familiar with the virtual technology. And so there are some days where the students that we serve, typically, because our students, I work for the college program for students with ASD. And so sometimes, even with like bad weather, it can be very sensory for students. And we were having some no-shows because of like rain or snow. So we started offering, even with it being like on campus and just a couple buildings over, the opportunity to have virtual counseling. And it's kind of really made a difference. And I think students got comfortable with being familiar with that technology. So it has increased availability to help get to students with outreach. So I think that maybe they just are okay with that, and maybe I don't want to say they like default to it, because some students, if they were around during the start of the pandemic, they don't like technology as much because it was kind of that like, this is a really big change, and it had so many moving parts to it. But I think now students who are kind of in the transition from, we're kind of a hybrid setting, I think they're more okay with like the virtual counseling. So I think it's helped a little bit with access to services.
I agree about it helping with access, but I have found that since COVID, and I won't say we're out of COVID, but since the vaccine, let's just say, and we could offer more in person safely, more students are choosing that than the virtual, at least here on our campus. And maybe because you're working with a specific population, Nate, there's something with that too. But so specifically, WVU says that we can't really do virtual counseling with students who are suicidal, have eating disorders, or substance use. That's just sort of the general rule. I don't know if that's everywhere, but I don't always follow that. I hope nobody's on here from WVU, because I have students who are chronically suicidal, and sometimes they just don't want to leave their house. And I feel like a touch point is better than nothing. You know what I mean? So I will do virtual occasionally with specific students, but by and large, students seem to want the face-to-face. Maybe they're just tapped out with all of the, technology at this point. That's just what we have found. So in this case, with the student that, with her being having suicidal ideation, definitely the counseling center should have a good connection with that student. But there's so many others that weren't checked on that list, Carolyn, that I think, like you said, that would be the opportunity to get in there from different areas and work with this individual student.
Yeah, and Michelle, something you said made me think about, I don't think I have this case pulled up anymore, but we've been using a pretty similar case form this whole year, and it has parents as one of the possible things you can check, parents or community, what kind of larger community. And a lot of the scenarios that we discuss don't have a lot of opportunity for bringing in the family and the community, the parents. But it could be that that's really important for this student who is, it sounds like missing home, having trouble connecting to kind of the larger community, that connecting through, maybe it's not a campus-based Native American association, but maybe it's something in the broader community, or maybe it's something that the counseling center could help set up, some sort of virtual connection with other Native American students on other campuses in rural Appalachia, or other opportunities like that. And then bringing in, asking the student how much they're in touch with people back home, and what they're proud of about going to school, what they're sharing with people back home, kind of exploring that aspect of care for this student as well, and connection.
Good point, Carolyn. And I was going to add on to this kind of stuff. Since at Pierpont, we have 4 main campuses right now. And then we're trying to be more inclusive and make them feel a connection with Pierpont itself. I think from my psychological training and understanding of things, I'm advocating that we go into groups. Like we have many student groups, several student groups, like we have one called CHOP for a culinary group. And if they can connect in that way, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a Native American club, but how can I connect with other things that the other students have? And then if they need to if the institution still needs to feel that they need to be connected with Pierpont, do it through the club. Because psychologically, I think we need to have the closeness, the commonality of things like that, and having different campuses and different things. And we're a 2-year institution. They have lives, they have families, this kind of stuff. So it's just very difficult to have things like that.
Another kind of question that I thought of when I was reading through this are, what are the barriers on your campus to this type of cultural teaching and awareness that students have opportunities to plan and start something, you know, like Michelle was talking about, that the lacrosse students did on her campus, to share about the history of lacrosse from their tribe, or to share about even cultural foods that are important in their background. Are there barriers to that? Do you see that happening a lot for different groups, thinking also about international students or students from various different cultures and areas of the country?
I think on our campus, we have a DEI center, and a person, you know, that's the coordinator there. Her name's Shannon Meek. We just had a dinner last weekend for 2 international students, one from Burma and one from Ukraine. And the dinner was to help with some fundraising efforts for different things that are going on in their countries. Obviously, we know about Ukraine. I missed the Burma presentation. I had to leave early, but we had foods from both of those countries. And then the students presented about the issues, you know, that their countries are facing. And it opened up an opportunity for discussion with folks, and kind of, you know, given community members, because it was open to our entire community, the greater area, not just our campus community, a chance to, you know, see it firsthand and decide if they wanted to contribute to that. So that was a good thing. But we have students, you know, representing probably about 10 different countries. And we've had international student dinners, which I think is really helpful. But I do think sometimes we do miss students and pockets of students where we could really be doing more to be inclusive of all communities. I know it's something that we're working on. I'm sure everybody here is kind of doing that, but something that Shannon and I have partnered on is called NCBI. It's National Coalition Building Institute, and we get students in the room, as many students as we can in the room, and we talk about different identities and family membership, community membership, and, you know, we celebrate all the different identities, and kind of have talks about that at that time. And that's helpful, but it's not a mandatory thing. So again, it's just getting as many students as we can to show up for an event like that. And then something else we do on campus is called speed friending. It's like speed dating. I don't know if anybody else does that on your campuses. But again, we get students in a room, we have chairs set up, they have like just a couple of minutes for each question that they're asking each other, and then one side moves down the line, and then we start that process over. And that's always been fun for students. They seem to like that. Sorry, I'm fiddling with my video as usual. I'm having technical issues, but I'm here again. So anyhow, I'll shut up now.
Thanks, Michelle. I think those are good examples of what schools are doing. And, you know, you have the situation where you're coming from a smallish school in a small community. And so there's an opportunity to get the word out about that sort of thing that you're doing, and really impact and connect with the community as well. Probably the experience is a little bit different on each of your all's campuses, just based on what your campus and community have to offer to students. I really have to be honest, I spent 5 years working on a reservation. And since I have been working in higher ed in West Virginia, I very rarely hear anything about Native American students, about trainings for working with this population. And we have quite a few Native Americans in our state, and I'm sure probably even more in our higher education institutions. And so I'm very much in tune to when I do hear things about this because of my work experience in the past, and I really just hear it pretty rarely. So I'm real interested to know if schools have other things going on for their Native American students.